right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's time for us to talk power, to talk electricity. Perhaps you can watch me right now on your television set because there's power, you know. And if you're watching me on the phone or on your mobile, yes, on your mobile phone, it's because you can charge your phones. If you don't have power, you can charge your phones. Even if you use a power bank, the power bank has to be charged by electricity. So two of my guests are joining me right now. To my far right is Adetayo Adegbemle, who is ED Power of Nigeria. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Tayo. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Okay. Suleyman Yusuf is an energy expert. He's also joining me here at the table. Hello, Suleyman. How are you?
Hello, Nancy. Very well, thank you.
I'm fine. Now, let's get started with the issue of the day, really, which is about, for me, yesterday I experienced blackouts. In fact, when I came back from work, there was no electricity, you know, as in
It's
disco, yes, disco electricity, not PHCN. You know, there's no PHCN and there's no NEPA. You know, like, oh, up NEPA, no up NEPA again, no PHCN. So there was no electricity, at least supplied by ADC to my house yesterday. But we've also invented, in my house, we've also invented, I'm always having light 24/7. Don't ask me how I have that. You know, I had to go alternative sources. But let's start with the strike, which has been suspended, but affected, I guess it also affected you, isn't it?
Well, I've been living off the grid for over 10 years,
so you've been off grid.
What was happening.
Thank you.
I'm just hearing some of this news
Yeah,
here now.
yeah, isn't it? But the thing is that it was, you know, a lot of people experienced it yesterday across the country.
It's actually nationwide.
Yes, nationwide.
Blackout, yes.
Let's talk about some of the issues that those, the electricity workers, the Union of Electricity Workers raised. Tayo, can you really speak to me about some of these issues and why you think it's still lingering? Even after the privatization, you know, in 2013, that privatization was done in 2013. Talk to me about why are these issues lingering?
It's unfortunate that we're still going back to, you know, what has happened pre-privatization. And let me say this. You know, this is my personal opinion. I think the strike is illegal. If the union has any issues to take up, they should have gone to court. I mean, it's unfair. I think it's an economic sabotage on Nigeria for them to turn the whole nation to blackness. It definitely affects a lot of industries that are not even aware. And it's unfair on consumers who are paying or are being made to pay for such their recklessness. So that's my personal opinion. Now, on the issues that has been raging on, of course, they were talking about their severance pay, they were talking about their payout, because for those that are following the power sector privatization, the old NEPA PHCN structure was paid off, right, for the new discos, distribution companies to take over, you know, the stuff. So initially, we had issues where they were challenging, they're being laid off, even after being paid. Most of them has been paid. But of course, I can't tell, I don't know where the money has entered, but somewhere along the line, some of their members has not been paid off from pre-2013, November 2013, handover to the disco. So, yes, they might seem to have a clear case to follow, right? But they should go to court, not putting the whole nation into blackouts.
Suleyman, I see you nodding. Is it in the affirmative?
Yes, certainly. You see, if you were to calculate the economic loss over these few hours of blackout, you know, I guess it's something that, you know, probably, you know, folds out, you know, what they're actually asking for several times over. So, you know, resolving things like these amicably is always a better solution than just setting the whole country back. We're all Nigerians, we're all part of the country, and, you know, it's in common interest that we should probably investigate properly what happened to the payoff and then, you know, resolve it rather than. So I'm definitely, you know, in affirmative with what he's just
Are both of you really throwing away the baby and the bathwater? Are both of you on the page of just dismissing perhaps the demands of the Union of Electricity Workers? They also have families, over 50,000 of them. Perhaps they're asking of their severance allowances, their pensions, and Their salaries.
Well,
yeah.
Definitely, I think they have a case, and it should be properly investigated. That's what I'm just saying. We can't afford, the breakdown of the country right now. And if that happens, it's going to affect each and every one of us. But there are usually channels, especially through the, we have industrial laws that we should, look at and probably follow. So, like you said, personal opinion too, but I think I don't have deep details into this, but I think it's actually illegal to just shut down without, following the process of, perhaps, the public who should be the supporters of these people who haven't, received their, their dues, are not even informed or aware. So if they make efforts to publicize the issues they cry, probably they will get more, public support towards resolving this matter and putting more pressure on the government to do what needs to be done.
Okay, Tayo, you want
Let me also add this. For those that might not be too aware of the antecedents of this union in per se, this is not the first time they're shutting down head offices of these schools at one point or the other, trying to demand for this, trying to demand for that. I will also question the timing of this. If you're following the power sector, you realize that NERC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, gave a deadline of December 8th for all the schools to submit, for 8 discos to submit reasons why they should not be penalized. From day one, the union never supported privatization from day one, right? The union has also along the line be sponsoring voices to say that the licenses of these discos should be revoked. So, timing that strike also to the point where to the period where there's so much pressure. The Senate committee had a roundtable on Monday here in Abuja. The disco's deadline was on Saturday, December 8th, and there's been a lot of apprehensions here and there. I believe it's just a means of putting pressure to say, or discrediting further the efforts of the discourse. Now, everybody that knows or following Power Up's activity will always tell you that we are probably the harshest when it comes to discourse. Our primary objective is you guys are doing whatever you're doing. You have all the funds to push for whatever policy you want to push for, but those that are suffering it the most are the consumers that are made to pay for your inefficiencies, for your ineffectiveness, right? So whatever you do right up there, make sure that the effect is toned down by the time it gets to your consumers. So I'm not in any position to speak for the discourse. But you see, we can't say that the power sector privatization, which is an arm of the power sector reform itself, has been a total failure. I mean, what we should be looking at is what are the lessons that we've learned over the years. So yes, putting pressures that the licenses should be revoked, I also believe is wrong. We stand to lose more than what we will gain. Again, like I said initially, I'm not saying that the union don't have a case to pursue, but there are other legal means of seeking redress. Comrade Ajero, that heads the union, definitely knows. If he has his facts, and why didn't he approach the court? Why hasn't he approached the court? Why can't the court make pronunciation? I mean, discos are private companies right now, so that means whatever the court says, we are sure that there will be some kind of response. It's not like they're taking the government to court. And if you're going to take the government to court, why don't you take BPE to court? BPE handled the privatization, not the discos. So why are you making the discos suffer for what they don't have control over, what they don't have a say over? So again, they have a case. I'm not throwing away the baby and the bathwater. They have a case. If they do, let them approach the courts, but not by throwing the nation into blackout.
Okay, now let's talk about the intervention, at least since, in my intro, I know since Obasanjo days, 2001, when this power thing started, electricity policy, then power sector reforms in 2005, till 2013, the privatization, we've seen different things, even intervention come for the power sector. There's currently, I think, a 600 billion that would also be given, I think, till June of next year.
650?
Yeah, no, 600 I think, 600 billion,
yeah.
yes. till June of next year. I think it was approved in September of this year. Central Bank on one side, during the Sanusi days, there was the PAIF, that is the power, and even the aviation fund.
Yes.
You know, yeah, is it, I think about
250?
213 billion naira. Yes, 213 billion naira. That was during Sanusi days. You know, so much. In fact, the World Bank also, I think, is to put about $3 billion in the power sector. African Development Bank also, they have this policy, I think, Power Africa or something. You know, so you're seeing quite a whole lot of money. Is money the problem of the power sector in Nigeria? Yes.
Thank you, Nancy. Very, very interesting question. And I guess in the past couple of years, since perhaps we had an intervention of 213 billion, sometimes in 2014, and then another 701 billion in 2017. So when you keep hearing these billions and the power is not improving, you keep wondering exactly what's happening. You see, for me in the first place, when you say intervention, I've been trying to seek a better understanding of what that intervention means. Because these companies are privatized, except of course for the transmission company. So if the federal government is investing money in the transmission company, yes, we could say they're investing in their assets to improve, you know, efficiency. But this money is spread across the DISCOs, the GENCOs. So will it be better to just call it a subsidy? Because to some extent, the DISCOs have been unable to generate enough revenue from the power that, you know, is given to them by the GENCOs, you know, through the transmission companies. And at intervals, the federal government has to come in and chip in something. So I was just, you know, thinking at the back of my mind if it would be better to just term it as a subsidy. And if we do term it like that, then we can begin to understand, you know, what happens.
But let us also be clear that, you know, anyway, and this power sector is so technical. Let's also be clear that the federal government has been coming in to cover the bills, which is all this money. That if the government did not come in to cover all those bills, perhaps there will even be no power at all. There will be a total blackout. We should
let me go back to let me go back to that your last the previous question, which was money the problem?
Is money the problem? It's not even worse. We are still in the present because the money is still going on.
The direct answer to that is no, money is not the problem.
Money is not the problem. So what is it?
Funny enough, we were having a conversation before we came on just now, and I was telling him something. We were discussing something, and I mentioned something that we should not forget the fact that what we are going through is called a reform. It's not a silver bullet. It's not an overnight solution thing. What it means is that when we started the power sector reform, we've identified that the monolithic NEPA that we had was not profitable. It was a serious cesspool of corruption. I mean, there are some. I mean, I've read a number of books on what happened to NEPA. You know, I mean, recently we still heard about how many containers at the ports that were abandoned because I'm sure somebody has taken the money. We have stories of projects that will be paid for. They will make purchases. Somebody from the store will return what's in the store out, you know, and stuff like that. Those are the kind of experiences we're having under the NEPA days, which necessitated something. We need to change our approach to the power system. Now, in the Obasanjo administration took that bold step to say, you know what, World Bank, you have experience all over the world. Come in and let us know how we can, you know, reform the sector. That was how that, you know, process started. Now, power sector privatization is just a bit, just a tiny weeny bit of the whole power sector reform. As of 2013, that the private sectors were coming on board, we should also understand that it was a black market. Nobody knew what we were going to experience. Nobody knew what we were going to. In fact, from the Power Sector Reform Act that we had as of 2005, right? As of 2013, nobody knew how the market would respond to it. Now, 2013, the discourse took over. Then all hell, you know, let loose. There was misinformation going around that because they're a new private sector now, all old bills has been netted out zero, blah, blah, the federal government has taken, which was not true. Now, it took an organization like Power Up to start educating people, even before NERC woke up to their responsibilities at all. We were on radio almost every day. We had a program where we tell them, no, that's not true. If you have any issues with them, you approach them. You know, they're now a private. When your transformer goes bad, they are now like any bank. If you approach any ATM and you try to use it, not bad. You won't say because you know how to solve, how to fix it. You bring out your screws. You don't do that. You call the attention to it.
But would you say that this reform is an expensive reform? Because I heard you clearly. It's a process.
It's a process. Now, the question, the one observation that we have made, and we have kept hammering on all the time, is the fact that the regulators, the policy-making arm, they are not changing as fast as the market is responding. They're not responding as fast as the market is changing.
Is the regulator the problem?
Policy is the problem.
Policy comes from regulator?
Naturally.
Which
regulators
is
and the federal government.
Yes, NERC and the federal government, the Ministry of Power.
They set the tone. See, I keep saying this. NERC is the arbiter between the investors, the government, the consumers. Right? The moment a referee allows the opponents to go away with hard tackles and no yellow cards, what it definitely means is that the other part of the team, either they get disenfranchised or they also start coming with their own hard tackles.
That's right.
But once the referee that has the rules says, we are playing this thing strictly by the rules, there is no bending backwards. If you cannot play by the rules, don't come to the game. Then everybody knows what and where to do. NERC people probably think that I'm a bad person because I keep talking about them, right? But we have to hit the nail right on the head. If you cannot say, if the policy says that every 3 months, every quarter, you must submit your report on customer service, right? Then it must be submitted.
How about for the discos? And let me bring in Suleyman here, because I've spoken a lot about power in, at least on this program. And it seems to me that discos are the weakest links in this process, just like he said, in this process, because one will say, okay, distribution companies are not collecting enough revenue to pay their bills to power generating companies who would pay bills to their gas suppliers. But if you take a look at the discos, for example, are they living up to obligation? Because if they are, perhaps NEC will not also be on their neck, just like you're also saying. I'm not speaking for NEC, neither am I speaking even for the discos, but as an independent person watching even the sector,
Well,
because did both of you agree that money is not the issue?
Yes, money is definitely not the issue. I can.
Continue on that.
Now, there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done with the discos. The field men, who carry out, the function of billing and all that, they are still not different from the days of NEPA.
True.
I tell you this because we operate in the field and we encounter them all the time. When they come to install a meter for you, they are the same people who will approach you and tell you, look, if this bill is getting too high, there is something we can do.
Like this. True.
I've experienced that severally, So I think the disco has a lot of cleanup to do. The electricity they're getting, if federal government is not supporting by, offsetting some of the GENCO's bills, they wouldn't be able to, be in business. In most homes today, one of the biggest challenges we have is electricity theft. Most times, those 3 phases you see, the phase that carries the most load is bypassed one way or the other. And it is the same disco staff who, engage in all this, So, but I know why that is happening. That's because, we don't have a system on the table where, you can only be in business if you're able to sell your electricity and generate enough revenue to buy. If federal government continues to intervene, you continue to see leakages at different levels, down to the disco level.
So are we saying that the federal government should take its hand off the pot of soup?
Well, I'll tell you this categorically, that as long as we continue to mingle politics with the business of electricity, we're not getting anywhere. Politics is one thing. I can tell you
politics in what area now?
Yes, in what area, I'll tell you that. We're private business developers. The only reason why there is no electricity in every part of the country today is because there is cheap electricity even though it's not stable. Everybody is having access to some electricity that is not paying for itself. The current tariff we have today is not cost reflective. There is nowhere in the world where you could sell electricity at 4 naira per kilowatt hour like we sell to the rural populace. That's a huge target market for me as a private investor. But they're already used to paying 4 naira.
But would they have the money, if you increase it to 10 naira, would they have the money to pay you?
Well, sometimes, let's refer back to what happened with the petroleum sector when there was, you know, I don't want to go deep into that, but at the point, will anybody assume that we'll be able to buy petroleum at 145? 45?
Oh, is it 43 or 45? You know?
But I think you've even gone gone far. Telecommunications. Interestingly, what was done in telecommunications was not privatization, but deregulation, right? Then you know how private sectors coming in with their base mass. At the point of their coming in, the average the ARPU, average revenue per user, was high, right?
Now it has gone down.
But now, because there's competition, I mean, I had issues with one of them, and I was online, Twitter shouting all the time, and one of them just said, "Hi, why don't you try us?" Interestingly, my online radio runs without, and I'm like, "Oh, so you guys have been there since." It's now a question of take this over this. Now, with the electricity market, there's something I keep saying. I think this is the time for Nigeria to sit back and redesign our power sector architecture. You know, now we have the gen codes from wherever they are, they send it to the national grid takes it and distributes it. Now, you're taking it down, you're getting to regional monopolies and stuff like that. Why don't you let's shake it up a bit, encourage competition. Break down the national grid. So if you're generating from Lagos, you don't need to send it to the NOC in Oshogbo first before it gets distributed. It gets distributed within Lagos. With that alone, you are reducing the loss on transmission. You are removing it from the equation. Now, what it means is that more people in Lagos will get more power, and I mean within Lagos and the environment. You are generating from Delta State. You don't need to take it to the national center to say, okay, 20% will now go back. Distribute it within that region. Then if you're generating from Kano or Kaduna, you distribute within that area. Now, what that means is this. And this is an interesting part. Let me go back to that question you're asking. You see, the moment there is power, it is regular, right? It also helps develop other things. Industry starts developing demands. Don't be surprised. If you give 24 hours supply to a particular town today, the rate that people will move to that place. Then people can now build industries and now make that money back to pay for.
Okay, as we move to the end of the program, because we have less than 3 minutes to end this show. I've spoken to a lot of power experts, at least in the past few years, and what I could deduce is that some of the problems in the sector is more human than more financial. Is it true? As those of you that are experts in the sector.
Absolutely true.
Yeah,
so
absolutely
it's more human.
Absolutely true. But also note that humans are supposed to be regulated, and somebody is responsible for that regulation.
Regulating our behavior.
I mean, even like the data bypass we're talking about is also about the mindset. That's right.
Okay.
It's about the mindset.
Okay. You actually said something that for the past 10 years you've been off-grid. Yeah. How? Perhaps for those that...
we have an apartment running, you know, totally off the grid on solar here in just less than a kilometer away from you here. You know, and before then I've also been running off the grid. So there is a key challenge, you know. Energy efficiency is one thing that we're not even looking at. That's an area where we can save at least 25% of the energy we're consuming today in households. We're not looking at that because it's available, it's cheap, and we can get away with it. That
brings me to the issue of hydro and solar power infrastructure. Should we begin to expand on that conversation?
Like yesterday. Like yesterday. You know, you said something about the regulators, NEC. You know, NEC needs to be very, very dynamic. Every day technology is changing, things are changing. We cannot keep one NEC, you know, regulation for 3 years and then we don't update it. You know, there is a lot of things happening around the world, especially with renewable energies, and I don't think NEC is sufficiently incorporating renewables in there.
Since 2005, 2007, there has not been one single amendment proposed by NEC or even the national federal government to the Electric Power Sector Reform Act So we are still carrying the 2005 document in 2019.
Okay.
Right.
No, that's 14 years after.
Aha.
I'll take some of those things up with NEC, and let's see if they're also living up to their expectation. And at least in my recent conversations with NEC, they always tell me, oh, they're up to the minute and all of that. But let's see, even as we go into the new year, and let's see if there will really be light for everyone in 2020. 2020 is the beginning of a new decade, I think. So perhaps Nigeria would be, you know, whether there will be light then or electricity. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. All right, I've been speaking with Adetayo Adegbemle, who is the EDPA of Nigeria, as well as Suleyman Yusuf, an energy expert. That's the much we